This is a response to an Al Jazeera Plus video, any of which equates to pure crystalline cancer. In keeping with a great deal of AJ Plus output, its sole purpose is to make the U.S. look bad while minimizing the agency of the so-called oppressed subjects featured in it. In fact, this video, The Native American Tribes Stuck in a Border War, is part of a series called Border Stories, which AJ Plus has produced over the past few months. I plan to cover the others in sequence soon. This video is purporting to chronicle the Tohono O'odham tribe and its battle with the U.S. Border Patrol over rights to pass over the international border between Arizona and Mexico in order to use their tribal land, which is split by the border. To hear them and AJ Plus tell it, the tribe is constantly harassed and raided by the Border Patrol with little to no provocation. A little research shows this is far from the case. Enough intro. Let's get to it.
We live encompassing everything that's on our land. All the animals, the plants, the mountains, the water. And they violated every single portion of that, and thereby violated our way of life.
They violated our way of life. Sounds ominous, and it is, but not the way Al Jazeera Plus wants you to believe. Wait for it.
What do you do when your home is divided by a border? Well, that's the dilemma of the Tohono O'odham Nation, or desert people. Their 4,000 square mile reservation is sliced by the U.S.-Mexico border. And with more and more militarization, Border Patrol are a constant presence.
There it is. Militarization and the Border Patrol. The evil U.S. and its jackbooted thugs are terrorizing innocent tribal members. Hold the word innocent in your mind. We'll get to that later.
Any movement that we made, if we go pick the saguaro cactus fruit, we have to show our tribal ID.
Wow. Heaven forbid you'd have to show some kind of ID when crossing an international border that's labeled a high-density drug trafficking area by the DEA.
So you don't feel that you're being kept safe from migrants coming across the border?
I have never been threatened by a migrant.
Never threatened by a migrant is a cute misdirection. Migrants don't cross the border here. Illegal immigrants cross here. What do you think those migrants do as they cross the reservation? They scare away your number one source of meat, the local deer, drop garbage, toilet paper, clothing, feces, and the occasional dead body, nearly 150 a year, on your sacred ground. If that's not threatening, please tell me what is. Going a step further, this is a heavy drug passage zone, so it's not just coyotes bringing people across. It's the Sinaloa cartel bringing drugs into the U.S. The Sinaloa cartel is not known for playing nice with the locals. Once a local grandfather's house was broken into in the middle of the night by smugglers. He was shot while in his bed, but was not killed. He played dead whilst his home was ransacked and only got up once they'd left with a few valuables and his vehicle. However, this doesn't count because he was shot by drug runners, not migrants.
This migration of peoples globally, it's a natural occurring thing. These borders are arbitrary borders, political borders.
I bet there were no borders when your tribe was the dominant culture in the area, but what about when others started to come in? Did you let them cross the hallowed mountain ridges and walk all over the place, settling on your land? Probably not. Also, why is it the Mexican border policy is never mentioned? This is perplexing since the Mexican government doesn't really care about people crossing the border into your reservation. Let the illegals and the drugs flow. However, coming into Mexico is another ballgame entirely. See, Mexico doesn't recognize the tribal land as actually belonging to the tribe. This means they can do with it as they please, and they did. In late March 2016, the land across from the main crossing for the O'odham tribe the San Miguel Gate, was sold to a private buyer. The new owners showed their solidarity with the O'odham tribe by erecting a wide fence with a padlock gate and signs reading "Private Property." No mention of that in this piece. Not surprising, since this doesn't fit Al Jazeera's "America treats its people like shit" narrative.
This is what happens when we come over here. The Border Patrol show up to see what we're doing, but they don't want to be on camera being rude.
The Border Patrol doesn't want to be on camera being rude, eh? I'm sure they don't know you, the main spokesperson for the tribe, and saw there was nothing going on, so didn't need to get out of the truck. I'm sure they're rude every single time they interact with you. Sure. While we're talking about interactions with law enforcement, why doesn't anyone bring up the DEA? Is the DEA so sensitive and polite to the tribe that they're seen as part of the scenery, a piece of sand in the desert? No. I'm thinking the DEA can't be mentioned because this would reinforce the reality that the O'odham are complicit in the drug trade happening on their land. This would devastate the "we didn't do nothing" party line Al Jazeera wants to eliminate.
There's no big wall or fence along the border of the reservation, and the O'odham people can walk across here at will. That's part of the complication for Border Patrol. It's an easier place to cross than others along the U.S.-Mexico border.
If it's an easy place to cross, then why is the tribe bitching? In fact, the Border Patrol has set up a residents-only crossing in order to facilitate the movement of the O'odham people over the border into Mexico and back. How rude!
But the O'odham aren't just caught up in America's war on illegal immigration, but it's war on drugs, too. Every year, hundreds of thousands of pounds of marijuana are trafficked through this region, and some O'odham with no other economic opportunities take part in it.
Not just marijuana, my dear. In 2015, the Border Patrol and DEA intercepted 928,858 pounds of drugs, with marijuana, methamphetamines, cocaine, and heroin topping the list. Some tribal members taking part has resulted in hundreds of federal prosecutions for drug trafficking, sometimes with entire families being ripped apart. I guess innocent is a relative term here. Hashtag not all.
If young people see cars, they want a car, they want to take their elders to the store on their own, they'll run that drug just till they can get money because there's no jobs out here.
I have no problem with that statement. Poverty is a factor in crime. I wonder, however, how many people in the tribe move drugs only because they want to be able to drive Grandpa to the store. Could it be more likely they want to make enough money to get the hell out of a place with around 60% unemployment? I can see the risk-benefit dice being rolled for that quite often.
Tribal member Mike Flores says that has made the entire nation a target.
You guys know who these guys are. Why don't you go and arrest them or deal with them directly instead of netting all of us with, one particular individual? We're not all in that same group of smuggling. Everybody here in the community is a suspect according to them.
You may be wondering why the O'odham Tribal Police Force isn't mentioned here as a balancing force. Why is only the Border Patrol the boogeyman, stepping all over the rights of these people? Simple. The O'odham Police Force is 75% understaffed. There are 70 officers for a population of 22,000 with an area to cover the size of Connecticut. The money is there to hire these officers. It's the lack of willing members to join that's the problem. Speaking of money, the tribal police spend millions of dollars every year on illegal crossings. Money that could be spent improving the lives of the people living on the reservation in more tangible ways.
Now, the government wants to watch Tohono O'odham territory even more closely. The Department of Homeland Security has proposed building 15 towers along the border, some propped on top of mountains the O'odham consider sacred.
Oh boy, lot to cover here. First is the evil U.S. government wanting to spy on the Odom tribe. That's simply not true. The towers are there to monitor the record drug and illegal immigrant traffic going through the reservation. Arizona leads all 4 Border Patrol zones in drug movement and seizures. The towers don't need to be along the border. They need to be along the smuggling routes favored by the illegals and the Sinaloa cartel. Since the closure of previously favored border crossings, this area is the main funnel for bringing illegals and drugs into the U.S. And why were those crossings closed? 9/11. Let that soak in, Al Jazeera.
The company to do it is the Israeli Elbit Systems, the very same one that helped build the wall in the West Bank.
Regarding the contractor for the towers, Elbit Systems out of Israel, wow. Way to muddy the waters, AJ. I guess when you're looking for a company that has a track record of fortifying contested borders and tracking illegal, also hostile traffic, you should only hire someone with a reputation for mollifying the fields of Arab states which enslave millions and bribe their way into getting the FIFA World Cup played in a fucking desert.
As you notice, the international border goes along here, which is not even near any of these proposed towers.
We're under surveillance almost 24 hours a day. If not people on the ground, it's, things up in the air, that are monitoring our movements.
Right. The technology and people patrolling are monitoring you, not the criminal activity taking place on your reservation every single day. Victim complex much?
Ophelia says Border Patrol should work with the Odom people to come up with solutions, rather than handing them down.
I agree that the American government, hell, any government, can use top-down policies and be less than caring regarding the local populace, and sometimes be downright hostile. That's a fact. But maybe if your people weren't part of the problem, there'd be more cooperation. The Tohono O'odham tribe has a policy to give the illegals aid so they can make it across the tribe's land. Do they think that maybe knowing there's help on the other side of the fence makes it more likely for so-called migrants to cross there, thus bringing down even more hated Border Patrol presence? Maybe, but the O'odham tribe seems to be happiest blaming everyone else for that instead of looking at themselves. And that's the end. A 3.5-minute video with enough holes in it to sink Pangea. Granted, the Native American people in America have been pushed around for hundreds of years, and they've not fared well for the most part. This is true. But to blame the Border Patrol for making your life tougher, when you're part of the reason they're there in the first place, is the height of disingenuousness, and being willing to complain about them on Al Jazeera Plus is downright pathetic. The leaders of the Tohono O'odham tribe should be ashamed for airing their people's perceived grievances on the anti-American mouthpiece of a country which enslaves 2 million people and is part of the Islamic movement to bring the West to its knees in subjugation. I hope you've enjoyed this video, such as it is, and are looking forward to the other pieces of garbage, interesting Al Jazeera Plus Border Stories videos coming soon. And now, an anecdote. Because of all the denial in this piece, I've decided to go with what I feel is the supreme example of denial that I've come across. This happened when I worked in the ER, and it was during a late shift. We got a call from the security officer that a young girl had come in and appeared to have been stabbed in the abdomen. We rushed out with a crash cart, and we found a blood trail leaving from the security officer station down the hallway. We followed the blood trail down the hallway and came across a young girl clutching her stomach and bent over. We lifted her up onto the cart, wheeled it into the trauma room, and immediately called a trauma alert, as we suspected she had been stabbed due to all the blood and the way she was holding herself. As the trauma team was woken up, we checked her for injuries, and upon immediate examination of the abdomen, we found no wound. As I started to remove the rest of her clothing to see if we could find the spot of the blood or any other injuries, I cut up the left leg of her sweatpants. As I got to the knee, I noticed a bulge on the inside of the left leg. When I uncovered the bulge, I found a baby. The baby was resting, it was breathing, and the umbilical cord was still attached. I motioned to the nurse who was at the head of the table. She looked down, verified what I had seen, and immediately canceled the trauma alert and called the nursery to come down to take care of a newborn. We did what we could do to stabilize things, and then the nurse said to the girl, "Your baby looks fine. I think things will be okay." The girl did not look at the nurse. She did not look at me. She looked at the ceiling and said in a very flat tone, "There ain't no baby." The nurse and I looked at each other, mouths open, and did not say another word. We waited for the nursery to arrive, and once they had taken over, we went out to the waiting room to find the gentleman who had driven her in. We found an older gentleman pacing about, looking worried. The nurse went up and said, "We've checked things. The baby's fine. There's nothing to worry about." The gentleman got a very stony look on his face. His eyes got hard. And he said in a very monotone voice, "She may have come in with the baby, but she ain't going home with one." Once again, the nurse and I were stunned and could not say another word. We had the triage nurse notify family services that they needed to come down and start talking to people. Then we left the waiting room, went back into the ER, and cleaned things up. We normally don't follow patients after they leave the ER because we have other things to do, other patients to take care of. I did hear through the grapevine, though, that the young girl had gotten the services that she needed and that everything was fine. But I do not know what the ultimate disposition of the baby was. I hope everything turned out well for everybody. Thank you for your attention.